I stood at the edge of the dock, watching hundreds of dead fish floating across my lake. The water slick with oil and chemicals. Submerged my throat. My stomach turned. This wasn't nature. This was sabotage. Crimson, and standing there pretending to be concerned, was Marjorie Kemp, the president of our HOA. Sunglasses, clipboard, fake sympathy. "What a shame, Mr. Hale," she said. "You really should be more careful with your property." Careful? Shimmer? She was the one who did it. I knew it the moment I saw her smile. She wanted to stop me from fishing, from even touching the water behind my own house. So she poisoned it. But what she didn't know? That same lake fed the water supply for her entire neighborhood. She didn't just poison me. She poisoned herself. Would you have let them get away with it? Or fought back like I did? Comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Because what happened next? It didn't just expose her lies. It nearly destroyed the whole community. Before all this, before the poison, the dead fish, and the lies, I just wanted peace. After my wife passed, I packed what was left of my life into an old Ford and moved to Cedar Falls, Missouri. Quiet town, cheap land, a small cabin by a private lake. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every morning I'd pour a cup of coffee, sit on the dock, and watch the sun come up over the water. The only sound was the splash of bass breaking the surface and the wind cutting through the pines. For the first time in years, I could breathe. The lake was shared between a handful of properties, but the HOA mostly stayed out of my business. Or so I thought. It started with a letter, polite, official-looking. Fishing on the community lake is restricted to authorized residents with an HOA permit. Authorized residents? Missionary. I was a resident. I owned the property. At first I figured it was some kind of clerical mistake, but when I asked around, a few neighbors warned me quietly. "Don't argue with Marjorie. She runs this place like a kingdom." I laughed it off. That was my first mistake. Because the next time I saw her, that fake smile of hers wasn't hiding a warning. It was hiding a threat. I saw her. She was waiting by my mailbox like a cop on patrol. "Morning, Mr. Hale," she said, flashing that tight, polite grin. "We've had several reports about unauthorized fishing on the lake." I laughed. "From who? The fish?" Her smile didn't move. "This community takes the rules seriously. The lake is maintained by HOA funds. You'll need a permit to continue recreational use." Up my deed, the one that clearly said lake access included. She glanced at it for half a second, then said, "Rules change, Mr. Hale. The board will be in touch." 2 days later, I got hit with my first violation. Unauthorized dock installation. The same dock that had been there since the 1980s. Then came the letters, piles of them. Noise complaints, landscaping violations, improper waste disposal. All lies. One neighbor, Old Man McCready, told me quietly that Marjorie didn't like outsiders. "Last guy who argued with her moved out within a year," he said. "Why?" I asked. He just looked at me and said, "He stopped fighting back." That night I stood on the dock, staring out over the still water, wondering how bad it could get. The next morning I had my answer. Plagiarism. Because when I stepped outside, my dock wasn't there anymore. Someone had sawed it clean off and let it drift into the reeds. When I saw my dock floating 50 feet from shore, I didn't even get angry. Not at first. Crimson, I just stood there, barefoot in the cold morning mud, staring at the jagged wood where it had been sawed off clean. No storm. No accident. Someone had done this on purpose. I dragged what was left back to shore and saw the blade marks. Deep, even cuts. Whoever did it brought a power tool. I already knew who it was. By noon, I was standing in front of the Cedar Falls HOA office, holding my phone with photos of the damage. Marjorie sat behind her desk, sipping from a mug that said, "Good vibes only." She didn't even look surprised. "Shameful. Someone vandalized my property," I said flatly. She looked up over her glasses. "Do you have proof?" "Protections." I've got smiled. "That's proof of a missing dock, not who took it." Her tone was calm, rehearsed, like she'd practiced this conversation in her head already. Jackson, she leaned back and said, "You know, Mr. Hale, most residents who cooperate with the board don't have these kinds of issues." That was it. The threat wasn't even subtle. I left before I said something I'd regret. When I got home, there was a letter taped to my door. Notice of non-compliance. Unauthorized alterations to shared shoreline structure. Daily fine, $250. They destroyed my dock and then fined me for it being gone. Over the next week, it snowballed. Trespass bags dumped in my driveway. Anonymous notes in my mailbox. "You're ruining the lake." Someone even called animal control, claiming I was keeping fish illegally. Missions who used to wave now looked away. One couple actually crossed the street when they saw me walking toward them. It's hard to explain how isolation feels when it's engineered. Every whisper, every turned back, all part of the same quiet campaign. I installed cameras, 4 of them, hidden in the trees, one pointing at the dock. If they came back, I'd have proof. 2 nights later, I got it. At 2:14 a.m., headlights swept across the yard. A silver SUV rolled up to the water's edge. 2 men got out, one of them in a Cedar Falls HOA maintenance jacket. They dumped a pile of dead fish onto my lawn, snapped a photo, and drove off. Shimmers. Morning, another letter. Relax. Environmental contamination. Improper waste disposal on property. That was the moment something in me snapped. I uploaded the footage, printed stills, and marched straight to Marjorie's office. She didn't even flinch when I dropped the photos on her desk. She looked at them, smiled, and said, "Sentenced. I'm afraid those don't prove anything, but nice effort." Then she laughed. Not the fake HOA laugh, a real, mean one. That's when I knew this wasn't about rules or fines anymore. Crimson. It was personal. And a week later, she proved it, when the water in the lake turned the color of antifreeze. A week later, I woke up to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that feels wrong. No frogs, no birds, no sound from the lake. Tensions when I walked down to the dock. The air hit me like a wall. Sharp, chemical, sour. The surface of the water shimmered in the morning light, but not in a way it should have. It had that oily rainbow film, the kind you see on asphalt after a storm. I knelt down, dipped my hand in, and pulled it back quick. Emissions. Bracelets. Not enough to blister, but enough to sting. Missions was in the water. I walked the shoreline, and it only got worse. Dead fish, bloated and white, floating in clumps near the reeds. Tightening, the cattails were turning yellow at the base. By the time I got back to the cabin, I could see Marjorie standing on her deck across the lake, phone in hand, pretending to take pictures. She waved, smiled, like she was proud of what she'd done. Later that day, I got another notice. Environmental violation. Chemical runoff traced to your property. Immediate remediation required. I laughed out loud, bitter and hollow. They'd poisoned the lake, and now they were blaming me for it. I called the county environmental office. The guy on the phone sounded skeptical until I mentioned I had photos and video of the water. He said, "Collect a sample, seal it tight. We'll run a test." So that's what I did. Gloves, jar, label, the whole deal. Missions stuck to my hands even after I scrubbed them raw. I shipped the sample to a private lab that same afternoon. While I waited, the HOA turned up the heat. Letters, fines, accusations. Someone even spray-painted "Lake Killer" on my fence. A week later, the lab called. The woman on the line didn't waste time. "Sir, that's not natural algae or fertilizer runoff. That's pesticide concentrate. Industrial grade." My heart dropped. "You're sure?" "Completely. And based on the chemical profile, this isn't something you buy at a store. It's commercial. Licensed use only. Listening use only. Licensed use only." I sat there in silence, my mind racing. The HOA contracted a landscaping company for all their maintenance. Lake cleanup, lawn spraying, pest control. And guess who owned that company? Missions. Sun. It all Sun. All clicked. They hadn't just dumped poison to get rid of fish. They were trying to make the lake unusable. No fishing, no recreation, no proof of ownership tied to my property rights. If the lake was declared unsafe, the HOA could legally restrict access and take control of it entirely. They thought they'd buried me, but what they didn't realize, that water didn't just feed my land. Terrorists too. And when the test results went public, the same poison they used on me started showing up in their drinking water. Discharge came in. I didn't go to the HOA. I went to the Department of Natural Resources. The man who showed up was a field inspector named Tom Grayson. Quiet, sharp, the kind of guy who's seen it all and stopped being surprised years ago. He met me by the dock with a field kit slung over his shoulder. "Let's see what we're dealing with," he said. I walked him along the bank, pointing out the dead fish, the yellowed grass, and the chemical slick that still clung to the surface. He knelt down, sniffed the water, and muttered, "Yeah, that's no algae bloom. That's man-made." I handed him the lab report. He scanned it, his brow furrowing deeper with every line. "Pyraclostrobin," he said. "That's an agricultural fungicide. Highly restricted. Needs a commercial license to buy." I nodded. "Marjorie's son runs the landscaping crew for the HOA. Tom looked up. "Then we've got ourselves a suspect." He started tracing the runoff line, following a small drainage ditch that wrapped behind the row of homes across the lake. We walked half a mile before he stopped and crouched near a grated pipe buried in the ground. He pulled out a small meter, dipped it in, and the reading spiked red. "Found your source," he said. "Terminated. Irrigation return. Cedar Falls HOA." I blinked. "Wait, that's their sprinkler system?" Shameful. "Yep. Feeds straight from the lake." I frowned. "You're telling me they've been using this same water for their lawns?" He gave a half smile. "Lawns, gardens, drinking water, same feed line. You're all on the same groundwater system, Mr. Hale." My stomach turned. They'd poisoned the lake, and now every tap, every hose, every kitchen sink in that neighborhood was carrying it. Tom stood up, serious now. "I'll have to file a report. This isn't a violation anymore. It's a contamination event." He looked around and lowered his voice. "Keep your head down, all right? People like this, they get desperate when they realize they messed up." Missions, state vehicles and health inspectors were parked along the cul-de-sac. Nampionship came out in their bathrobes, confused, scared. One woman shouted, "What's happening?" And I'll never forget the look on Marjorie's face when she stepped outside. Perfect as ever, until she saw the hazmat suits at her sprinkler valves. Missions, her smile finally cracked. That night, I sat by the window and watched the flashing lights fade across the lake. Sirens, clipboards, panic. It was all falling apart. But something told me it wasn't over. Missions people like Marjorie don't admit guilt. They cover it up. And when the news broke the next morning, she didn't apologize. She blamed me. The next morning, chaos hit Cedar Falls. News vans lined the street. Reporters and windbreakers shoved microphones toward anyone who'd open their door. The headline on the local station read, "Toxic runoff contaminates lake. HOA under investigation." I watched it unfold from my porch, coffee in hand. They were interviewing residents, mothers holding empty water jugs, retirees furious about their brown lawns. People wanted answers, and as always, Marjorie tried to give them, her way. She stood at the end of her driveway, perfectly rehearsed for the cameras. "Unfortunately," she said, "one of our residents neglected to maintain his shoreline properly. His runoff compromised the ecosystem. We're cooperating fully with authorities." Then she gestured across the lake, at my house. Gambling. She was still trying to spin it, but not this time. Shameful, because 10 minutes later, the broadcast cut to Tom Grayson from the Department of Natural Resources. He held up a map showing the pipe we'd found, the one labeled Cedar Falls HOA Irrigation Return. Shields. "This contamination originated from the HOA's own irrigation system," he said. "There's no evidence of private property involvement." The reporter turned back to the camera. Officials confirmed the HOA's landscaper, owned by the president's son, may be connected to the chemical release. I'll never forget the look on Marjorie's face when she realized her story had just fallen apart, live on TV. By noon, residents were storming her porch. They wanted refunds, explanations, someone to blame. She tried to talk over them, shouting about fake reports and defamation, but no one listened. The same people who once defended her were now demanding she resign. Stiffness. I got a knock at my door. It was Elena, the nurse from 2 houses down, one of the few who'd always been kind to me. Missions. She said, "You were right, David. We all owe you an apology." I nodded. "You don't owe me anything. Just make sure she doesn't do this again." That night, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. Dismissing the members quit. Marjorie didn't. She just smiled for the cameras, again, and promised to restore order. Turbulence. But behind that smile, I could see it. Fear. And when people like her get scared, that's when they do their worst. Sluggish. By the end of that week, the story had gone statewide. The Cedar Falls lake contamination was on every channel. Headlines flashing across screens. Reporters camping near the HOA office. Missions. Environmental.e, crime, and cover-up started getting thrown around. I stayed quiet. I didn't need to say a word. The evidence was speaking for me. But Marjorie, she was unraveling. She held an emergency press conference in front of the HOA clubhouse, standing behind a podium, voice shaking, still trying to spin the story. "We have been unfairly targeted," she said. "This was a coordinated attack by a disgruntled resident who falsified data to discredit our community." Disgruntled resident. That was me. I watched from my porch as reporters huddled around her. One of them, a young woman from Channel 7, asked, "Mrs. Kemp, can you explain this?" She held up a photograph. It showed Marjorie's son loading chemical barrels into a maintenance boat at midnight. The date stamp was the same day the fish started dying. Trembling. You could have heard a pin drop. Marjorie's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted toward her son, who stood a few feet away looking like he wanted to disappear. I don't know what that is," she stammered, but it was too late. Stimulate online like wildfire. Crimson came the video. Footage from a nearby dock cam showing the same boat dumping liquid near the drainage pipe. No editing, no fakes, just cold, undeniable truth. Combating down, the State Environmental Bureau issued a formal statement. Evidence indicates intentional introduction of restricted-use pesticides into the Cedar Falls water system. Investigation pending. Refreshed road collapse overnight. Musters, 3 members resigned. 2 others publicly apologized. Madison lined up outside the clubhouse the next morning, demanding refunds for their dues. Crimson wanted charges filed. Emi's Elena called me that afternoon. "They're tearing the place apart," she said. "Marjorie's hiding in her house. People are scared." The lake that evening, quiet again but not peaceful. The water looked lifeless, gray, empty. Missions. And across the way through the trees, I saw movement on Marjorie's porch, her silhouette in the window, watching me. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. I answered. Shields, voice low and nervous. "Mr. Hale, this is Ryan, Marjorie's son." Unfinished. I didn't speak. Practition answered. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said. "It was supposed to be a warning, just scare you off the lake. She told me to do it." Shimmer Hamden. "You just poisoned an entire neighborhood," I said. Shimmer. He paused. "I know, and she's trying to make me take the fall." He said he had proof, emails, invoices, orders, and if I helped him, he'd give me everything. I didn't know it then, but that call would end the war once and for all. I met Ryan Kemp 2 nights later at a diner off Route 12, the kind of place that still smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease. He looked exhausted, unshaven, a man carrying too much guilt and not enough sleep. When I sat down, he didn't even look up. He just pushed a manila envelope across the table. Inside were invoices, purchase orders, and emails, all addressed to Cedar Falls HOA board, signed by Marjorie herself. Bulk pesticide orders, unlicensed disposal forms, and one note that made my stomach turn. Runoff treatment scheduled. Make sure Hale's section gets the heavy dose. Silenced, I looked up. Ryan's hands were shaking. She said you were ruining the lake, he muttered. Said you were bringing down property values. I thought we were just spraying near the bank, until the fish started dying. Why tell me this now? I asked. He took a deep breath. Terminated, the DNR subpoenaed my company, and my mom told me to destroy everything. He glanced at the window, paranoid. Salmon. She'll throw me under the bus to save herself. I'm not going to prison for her. I slid my phone across the table. Record it, I said. Say it all. He did. Every detail. Treadmill names, the chemicals names, the meeting where she told the board the lake needed to be reset. By the time he was done, the diner was empty except for us. I sent the file straight to Tom Grayson from the Department of Natural Resources. He replied within minutes. Got it. Don't talk to anyone. We're moving now. The next morning, the sound of sirens echoed across the lake. Simulations fleet pulled up to Marjorie's property. Jang in jackets marked Environmental Enforcement Division surrounded her house. From my porch, I watched them lead her out in handcuffs. Even then, she kept her head high, trying to smile for the cameras. But her hands were trembling. Tension swarmed. Neighbors shouted. Semantics yelled, "You poisoned us!" She didn't answer. She just stared at the ground. By noon, the story hit every major outlet in the state. Missions, HOA president arrested in lake contamination scandal. Officials link poisoning to Cedar Falls board. Shameful. Or so I thought. Missions. 2 days later, I got another call, this time from the district attorney's office. They wanted me to testify. Missions. When I took the stand, I told them everything, from the fake violations to the dead fish to the night Ryan called. I played the recording for the court. Missions sat 10 feet away, her expression hollow. When Ryan testified, he broke down halfway through. He told them how she ordered the chemicals, how she promised to handle any fallout, and how she laughed when the first batch hit the water. The jury didn't take long. Blinds on all counts: environmental negligence, falsifying records, property destruction, and harassment. Sentenced to 4 years, with 2 4 years, with heavy fines and a permanent ban from managing any HOA. Ryan got probation in exchange for his testimony. Missions. The Cedar Falls HOA dissolved within a month. Every sign, every logo, every trace of Marjorie's control disappeared from the neighborhood. Shields. But even after justice came, the lake wasn't the same. The water was clearer now, yes, but quieter. Too quiet. Sometimes I still catch myself listening for the frogs, the splash of fish, the sound of life coming back. It's happening, slowly. But scars take time. That night, Elena came by with her daughter and handed me a pie. "You did it," she said. I smiled. "No," I told her. "We did." The next morning, I walked to the dock with my coffee and looked out over the still water. The reflection was calm, peaceful again. And then I noticed something. Movement just beneath the surface. A ripple. Then another. Powerless. And for the first time in a long time, so was hope. Spring came slow that year. Imientos, the snow melted, the air softened, and for the first time in months, Cedar Falls felt alive again. The cleanup crews had long gone, the warning signs were taken down, and the lake, the same lake that once shimmered with poison, finally sparkled in the sun. It didn't just look different, it felt different. Fleming, like it could breathe again. I rebuilt my dock, stronger this time. Trembling I nailed down felt like reclaiming something they tried to take from me. My peace, my dignity, my right to exist without fear. One morning I sat at the edge of that dock, coffee in hand, watching the mist drift over the water. And there it was, a silver flash, then another. Fish, tiny darting shapes rippling the surface. For a second, I couldn't move. All those months of anger and exhaustion hit me at once, and I realized something simple. Missionary. You can poison a lake, but you can't kill what refuses to stay dead. The neighbors began coming back too, kids laughing by the shore, plagiarism's daughter casting her first line off the dock. Even the ones who once crossed the street to avoid me now waved when they passed. The HOA was gone, dissolved, dismantled, deleted from every record. In its place, the town formed a lake stewardship committee, run by volunteers, not power-hungry board members. They asked me to chair it. At first, I said no. I was tired. But Elena convinced me otherwise. She said, "You fought for this lake when no one else would. You earned the right to protect it." So I did. We started hosting cleanup days, fishing events, even outdoor classes for local kids to learn about conservation. And slowly, the lake became more than just a place again. It became a reminder. Sometimes, when the sun sets and the water turns gold, I sit on that dock and think of my wife, how she used to say peace isn't something you find, it's something you build. Missions. She was right. Now, when I look out at the lake, I don't see the damage anymore. I see survival. And I know, some fights are worth every scar they leave behind. Have you ever had an HOA or neighbor go too far? Tried to take something that was yours? Tell me your story in the comments. The craziest one might just be the next one I tell. And remember, no matter how deep they try to bury you, they forget one thing: you're still a seed.